Welcome back to MedTech Insights. Today we're looking at Vento, which is billed as the world's smallest non-invasive CO2 monitor and is developed by UK charity and MedTech startup Keep Me Breathing. Continuous CO2 monitoring has long meant bulky, complex hospital hardware, leaving patients with severe respiratory conditions bound to heavy equipment. Keep Me Breathing is setting out to change that with Vento. The company says the device is 90% lighter and 20 times smaller than traditional clinical systems. Today, I'm joined by James Oakley, founder and CEO at Keep Me Breathing, after members of the team just completed a grueling 1,000-mile validation challenge across Europe, generating real-world physiological data for the device. We're going to discuss the engineering behind this non-invasive breakthrough, its potential in both clinical care and sports performance, and how Vento sets the stage for a novel breathing pacemaker. James, thank you for joining us.
Hi Oli, thank you very much for having me. Pleased to be here.
Now, for our viewers who may not be familiar with congenital central hypoventilation syndrome, did I get that right?
Well done. You've already said it better than 95% of people, so well done. Yeah.
Oh, that's a success then. So for people who aren't familiar with CCHS for short, can you explain the condition and why continuous CO2 monitoring is so important to dealing with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, your attempted pronunciation, which was very good, is one of the reasons why, although it's so rare, it's still not heard about by many clinicians, physiologists, people in general, because it's so hard to flip and say. Lots of people also say CCHS or Ondine's curse. Ondine's curse is probably a really nice way to explain it, which was a fairy tale about a water nymph who essentially had a spell cast over him so that the moment he fell asleep, he would stop breathing and die. And that's very much what CCHS is if left untreated. CCHS is a disease that you're born with. And effectively, the hallmark of it is that the moment you fall asleep, as well as at other times during the day, you stop breathing and you lack the receptors in your body to notice that you have low oxygen or high CO2 levels. And therefore, like me and you would, you don't take in additional breaths to compensate for that.
Now, what does current medical grade CO2 monitoring look like and where does it fall short?
So current medical grade would be literally the size and probably weight of my head, and you'd be connected up to a power socket. So again, you'd need a power socket for continuous monitoring. Without that, there is like a couple of hours of battery at maximum, but it's not really portable. You're also continually reading either directly through a tube that someone's breathing into through the nose, or you effectively have heaters which heat the skin to about 43 degrees centigrade and can't be worn in the same place for very long because of risk of burns. So that's how it currently looks. What we're working towards is something that's the size of my watch here, but what we currently have is something which is about half the size of my phone here, effectively. So if we imagine it's half that size, sort of 3 inches by 2 inches wide, and effectively that runs for hours, completely non-invasively, and does not, importantly, heat the skin up to such a high level that it requires to be changed positionally continuously. So if we're thinking for children with rare diseases, if we're thinking for sleep apnea, you'll be able to measure that through a whole night's worth of sleep study without changing position or waking up the patient, so to speak.
Now, it's rare for a healthcare charity to act as a medical device developer. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to speak to you. I'm so interested in just the story in general. At what point did the charity realise that existing medtech giants weren't doing enough and you had to develop this hardware yourselves?
Yeah, so we got our son's diagnosis, and a week later we realised that, well, in fact, the same day we realised that there was not the pharmaceutical or commercial incentive to do anything about this disease because of the lack of numbers. So there's a couple of hundred people in the UK with CCHS, around 5,000 to 7,000 cases active worldwide. There are more than them, but they're not picked up, things like SIDS cases and things, but where you could actually affect it, let's say 5,000 to 7,000, and realistically, they're only going to have budgets to do anything at all anyway if you're in first world countries. So small audience, lack of commercial incentive, we knew it would be us that needed to do that. And we're a very different type of charity in that, like you said, everything goes into research, development, technology, as opposed to, let's say, creating awareness. So when we run a marathon and somebody donates £10, that goes into £10 of an engineer's time or something like that, which I think is quite important, but also allows us to stay very on mission, so to speak, and develop things like Vento.
Mm-hmm.
This is a disease. Nothing's been done for it. Nothing has been done in 50 years since it was first diagnosed. We've come along and done something within 3 years, so it shows it can be done. It's just we need to push and continue from our side to raise the funds to be able to do that.
Now, moving from the prototype stage to a regulated medical device does require significant funding. You kind of answered my question a bit there, but how does Keep Me Breathing plan on balancing the charitable mission with the demands of scaling the hardware production? But you've kind of answered it there with the funds just going back into research and development of the device.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, say, our future, we know the medical regulatory side is not only tough but very expensive, significantly more expensive than if we were doing a wellness-based device. This device that we're building is potentially life-saving, could be class 2B, something like that on the medical regulatory scale. One of the things that we're looking at doing, we need to fundraise. We've had it validated via university laboratory. We've just got some good results back from our 1,000-mile ride to Austria as well, which we'll be presenting soon. So that's good news. Everything at this point is gone the right way. One of the things that we could choose to do, should we wish, is, for example, license the patent that we've submitted for sports outside of Keep Me Breathing to generate funds to fund the medical side. Again, we like to be quite entrepreneurial in what we do. So something like that, where somebody else could get a benefit, is firstly great, but secondly, if it enables us to put the device on patients sooner, and by that I mean next 12 months definitely, then we'll need to do things like that in order to get that funding.
And this is more of sort of a personal question for you. What sort of experience in your professional life before this have you drawn on during your work with Keep Me Breathing? Because you must have had some sort of background.
Well, I don't know if your viewers can see if they're on the video, but I have zero background in anything charitable. I have zero background in anything medical, and I have -5 experience in anything engineering. I can't even change a bike tire. Fortunately for everybody, I have not touched the device. I have only overseen it. I have not built it. We've had people who do know what they're doing. No, I've previously and always run companies, so literally straight out of university for good 12 years before we received a diagnosis with our son Casper. And so what I did know how to do was put a team together, and that's literally what we did. And then we literally ran marathons, begged off the street, so to speak, to raise the first £250,000. Now we've raised over £500,000. We've won various grants. And so we've put the team together who's able to deliver something like Vento, combined with the fact that myself and other trustees of the charity are parents of kids with CCHS. So it means that we keep CCHS at the heart, the usability, the length of time it has to last without being put back in the power socket. That's all designed from our end. And then we've had brilliant engineers who are far more capable than me at actually building the thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking about the engineering of the device, it's designed as the world's smallest wearable CO2 monitor. As we said before, 90% lighter, 20 times smaller than the standard clinical equipment. What were the key engineering breakthroughs that those engineers that you just spoke about, that they made that allowed the team to achieve this level of miniaturization without sacrificing the medical grade accuracy that's required?
Yeah, so essentially we gave a brief of what was the sizing it had to be, the maximum sizing, in order to make it wearable. Because typically with CCHS, it's kids who wear it. So you need, say, an 8-year-old can wear it, as well as, let's say, an adult patient looking at sleep apnea, for example. And so they literally went to spec and developed a novel approach. And because it's novel, that's why we were able to patent it. So it kind of worked really well. The actual world's smallest was never hard to do because, again, if it was smaller than my head, we'd have the world's smallest. So with that in mind, we can say that, but it's the world's smallest by far is how I'd, the realistic title for it, for a portable non-invasive CO2 monitor. And it's just something that, as I say, we said has to be wearable. We want to get it down to the Garmin size. Our major problem with that at the moment is making something that is this big, but also can last 8 hours overnight to monitor, because the battery is a problem.
Speaking about how the device works, how does the Vento device alert patients, caregivers, when CO2 reaches those dangerous levels outside the hospital environment, like you said, during sleep or everyday activities?
Yeah, so how Vento works is if we imagine like a Dexcom or a CGM monitor for your blood sugars, so it continually monitors the trend. And for example, if say I'm suddenly cycling up a mountain, you will see that trend rise, and then what you'll see is that trend even out when you're at a certain level of CO2, because your body begins to compensate. Should the body not begin to compensate, for example, in the realm of CCHS, then actually what you'll see is that trend begins to lift upwards and upwards. And once it reaches a certain threshold, the device is able to alarm, and are building at the moment so that it's able to alarm through an app as well. And that's kind of what we want to do long term. The app is essential as well, because if we think about other conditions that Vento can genuinely help, if you have sleep apnea, COPD, you have a sleep study maybe, I don't know, once, twice a year if you're lucky, and you make changes based on if you're feeling well that day or if you were performing poorly that day. This is something which, like a Dexcom or a CGM, can actually monitor you continually, so that the clinician has oversight of how you've been and how your, let's say, BiPAP or CPAP pressures are, and how that's performing over the period of months rather than just one day. So that's where, not just CCHS but other diseases can really benefit from what we've done.
Now, a few of your colleagues have just completed a 1,000-mile bike ride in Europe while wearing the Vento device. What was the thinking behind testing it on an extreme endurance challenge rather than just relying on clinical trials?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few reasons for that. Firstly, is we needed to go relatively extreme to get long-term data and see how people performed under pressure. And when I say pressure, physiological pressure, and how Vento performed. What we did was we actually tested it, the exact climb, with Portsmouth University before, to make sure that the device, firstly, we have a baseline, so we knew the device performed correctly because we were monitoring it alongside Portsmouth already gold standard equipment. So we knew roughly what to expect, and then we needed to take it outside the lab to show we could make it work when you've got the wind blowing on you, when you've got the sun shining on you, things like that. Again, we'd kind of already tested some of that, so we've been put in a room that's 35 degrees, and we've put it in a room that's 8 degrees, and we've been put in a room that's extremely humid, or a room with low oxygen. So we thought it would work, and we've done some outside testing. We've never pushed it that hard over that many days and hours. So it's nice to, as I say, see the initial positive data that's coming back from that.
Now, you touched on it before, but you've been working with the University of Portsmouth and their extreme environments laboratories. What specific data points did they evaluate during that bike ride in Europe?
So a number of different things, both, let's say, for the bike ride and prior to the bike ride. So if you're happy for me just to go back almost 30 seconds, what we needed to make sure is that we were monitoring true CO2 levels and not something else. So data points they were looking at is how much does our device correlate with galvanic skin response, because your skin has that response when you exercise, for example. So we needed to know that it was working both, say, during breath work, where you wouldn't have the same level of galvanic skin response. What about blood flow? Were we accidentally monitoring blood flow? And all of those things, thankfully, we found out we were not monitoring, and it was the CO2. So we found that CO2 noise in the tests, and then literally we went through, as I say, and went and did those tests. So we had James is the guy that did it. We had James's, let's say what his CO2 was in the lab before we knew how many breaths per minute roughly he'd be taking. We knew the volume of those breaths. I would say their extreme environments lab is very good in the sense of it looked like he was going on a moon mission, so to speak, the amount of testing we were doing before. So we had all those data points to directly compare. And then, as I say, most importantly from us, we knew roughly what to expect from the CO2 lines, and that's why we can sort of compensate and say, look, it's matching, therefore I feel positive about this data.
Now, earlier this year you outlined the goals for 2026 and you mentioned that Vento represents phase one of a 5-year roadmap. Can you talk a bit about that roadmap and what the next stages are?
Yeah, no problem at all. So let's say phase one was, we called it an adaptive respiratory system, where essentially Vento is built being able to feed back via Bluetooth to a device, either external or internal, that then the device could change, for example, the pressures or the frequency of a number of stimulations of diaphragm if you have an internal pacer. Stage two was having that app element, which is whereby we can look at data over a period of months, but also seconds, so we can make decisions quickly, but also over the long term. And finally, stage three, which is as close to a cure as you will get for this disease, certainly at the moment, is having an internal diaphragm pacer. And how I describe that is, if you imagine a cardiac pacemaker, when your heart misses a beat, it picks up the beat for you, and this is exactly the same. So you effectively, with CCHS, you might miss every breath when you're asleep, and the idea is that that kicks in, but it needs to have that CO2 data running from a device like Vento in order to give, let's say, the AI effectively the right algorithm to give you the right pressures or to step in when it's required.
To meet those next stages, is like a certain fundraising goal that you're looking at? Is there a certain number you're hoping to meet?
Yeah, when I say we've done the work, luckily again, not me personally, but we've done some work with a team of PhD and students at Cambridge University who have looked into this in some detail. We've had very valued free advice from people in the industry who have been very kind to us with their time. We probably need to raise, to do everything, in the region of 15 to 20 million, which, while it sounds like a big number, what Vento does is puts us in the pitch for those larger grants. It allows us to sell the patent potentially if we need funding. So it gives us more routes to get to that 3 to 4 million. And once we've done that and the device developed, again, and you can show it works, then you're far more able to get grant funding or investment, again, depending on which route we're looking at, to go through. So it's almost like that first couple of million is most important to us because we can show what we've promised. And this isn't an idea we've dreamt up. This is something that's been sketched out by engineers, scientists, doctors, and also backed via a written letter by over 130 clinicians and practitioners from 7 countries around the world. In a nice way, as in we feel very proud of this. It's the largest signed backing for any rare disease treatment, effectively, that's ever happened. So we're very proud of that, but we want to try and follow that through and raise the funds that we need to put it into practice.
Well, that's it for my questions. Thank you very much for your time. And if anyone wants to get in touch, wants to learn more about Keep Me Breathing and the Vento device, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, firstly, please do get in touch. We genuinely value it. The amount of steps forward we've been able to take thanks to people's time is huge. And so my email personally is james@keepmebreathing.com. We'll happily do favours in return. Me and my colleagues, we are probably the foremost expert in personal CO2 levels because we're the only people who have gone around for days and months on end with one on our arm, seeing how different environments affect us. So maybe there's something we can give back as a thank you, something like that, and we're very happy to do so because we really appreciate everybody's help, and God, we need it as well.
Well, I think it's an incredible story, but also an incredible device that you're making. So I wish you all the best, and thank you very much for your time today.
Appreciate your time as well. Thank you very much, and have a good day.